Welcome to the Reopening Safety Net podcast. We're here to support you with information that we know will help you make good choices in getting back to supporting your clients like we know you love to do. Because clearly stated knowledge nullifies fear, and that's going to result in a powerful action plan. I'm Deanne Lenson. As an international spa consultant and master coach, I've shifted from building spa businesses to helping them survive, and that's why I'm so proud to bring you these two guests. Our first guest is attorney Mikhail Marjorel. He was one of the youngest lawyers to be called to the bar in British Columbia. He got his first legal decision while he was still in law school. Mikhail is the proud recipient of numerous legal awards. In his diverse practice in his company, Bear Creek Law LLP, employment law is one of his favorite areas to provide services to both new and returning clients. Mikhail has appeared in all levels of court in British Columbia, from provincial all the way to the Court of Appeal, and various other employment-related tribunals, including the Workers' Compensation Appeal Tribunal, Employment Standards Tribunal, and the BC Human Rights Tribunal. He currently has the second largest award for injury to dignity among all BC Human Rights Tribunal cases ever. His company is Bear Creek Law LLP, bearcreeklaw.com. He can be reached at 604-259-6200. Our second guest is Gordon Toretta. I met him when he was the corporate director of spa operations for Fairmont Hotels and Resorts. There, he conceived all spa business plans, designs for future facilities, the branding plans, as well as the standard operating procedures manuals. Next, he was vice president of spa operations for Hyatt Hotels. There, he created and launched the Hyatt Pure brand, which included 110 unique spas, and they were awarded Best Spa Brand by Spa Finders. Next, he was the vice president of services for PetSmart, where he dramatically increased business, including add-on sales by 120%. Gordon co-created and managed the Marilyn Monroe Spas as the COO. Currently, he's president and founder of the Toretta Group International, where he provides expert leadership and strategic direction to support marketing positioning, organic growth, and product integration. He also is the area spa director for Marcus Hotels, where he defined their Well Spa brand. He has increased spa success in every way and improved the spa's NPS by 60% within 12 months onward. He can be reached at 312-479-6717. Welcome. We are so proud to be here with two very, very powerful professionals, and you heard their bios. They are top of their game in what they do. And we're here because we know that there's a lot of fear happening and uncertainty in reopening in the spa industry right now, and we're here to give you both the legal information, and our lawyer will explain the difference between legal advice and legal information, and the opening protocols that are working for one of the top spas in the United States. So first, I would like to introduce the lawyer that we have with us, attorney Mikhail Marjorel. And I am very excited because he not only, just in what he knows and having researched different provinces in Canada, has a lot to share. And one of the things that I was also it was kind of fun to know is you were one of the youngest people ever called to the bar in British Columbia, and it sounds like you've really just been hitting the road running since then. Tell us a little bit about that quickly.
Also, very briefly, in university, I just more or less was taking 6-7 courses a semester, both during regular semesters and summer. And so 2.5 years into university, I was 1 credit shy of actually graduating. And so that kind of sped things up. And since then, just been going at it.
And you've won lots of awards, and you have a record number of wins for your clients. So The questions that we have for you come from some of the top spas in Canada, some of the biggest resorts, and some really lovely people that have a spa in their home. So the answers to these questions are going to be valid for everyone. So the first one I have for you is: can you force employees or customers to wear a mask?
So the short answer, and I love giving short, concise answers without making people wait, is yes. The one thing that I would um, always caution my clients is that realistically, you need to make sure you don't give any impression that there's any form of discrimination that might open them up to a human rights tribunal complaint. So as long as you make this a policy that is uniform and applicable to everyone, you're good. The other thing that I would say is you can't force people to buy your product in order to go into your spa at an exuberant price. For employees, this will be considered part of their uniform if you make it mandatory. And so you can't actually charge them for it. And for customers, if you are going to be selling masks at the door or in advance, perhaps you have ones that have your logo or some sort of design affiliated with your spa, make sure you don't force them to be bought at exuberant prices. What we're seeing for surgical masks is approximately $1 per mask. Sometimes it's a loss leader, sometimes it's break even. And for cloth, more customizable masks, prices in the range of $10 to $20 are acceptable as well. So those are the two big things. It's completely within your rights as an employer and a business owner to require both your employees and customers to wear masks.
Okay, and the other thing that I wanted to clarify and would like you to explain, the difference between legal advice and legal information. I think we need to make that really clear.
Certainly. So it's best explained through an analogy, and the one that I prefer is through chess. Legal information is similar to knowing the rules of chess, how pieces move in the objective. And legal advice is taking that information, applying it to a client's specific fact pattern and helping them achieve whatever their objectives are. And oftentimes it's compensation or dismissal of a lawsuit, things of that nature. And finding out what is the best step to take in that specific scenario, which just comes from years of practice, having done many of these files, and just practice. This is a profession. And so today we'll be given primarily legal information. Some of the facts or some of the discussions that we'll be having will be kind of broad advice in terms of good things to do. But certainly if a client wants to have a more specific conversation and find out exactly what steps they need to take, that would constitute legal advice. And at that point, I have to sit down with them or go over Zoom and have that conversation, make sure there's a proper solicitor-client relationship established.
That makes perfect sense. Well, the next question very possibly would not only have some very powerful legal information that you're going to share, but there might be a need further than that, and that is this. Should we have all guests signing a COVID-19 waiver form, or is verbal screening enough?
Certainly. And this is where we're getting into a bit of advice. I can certainly tell you when I'm doing these cases on the plaintiff side, that if a company says they have a verbal policy, it's very, very difficult to prove what it was and that it was actually communicated in court. Many court cases are started years later, and your trial might be 4 or 5 years away. If you have a verbal waiver, I apologize, technically that is sufficient. But you're going to have a real big problem proving what was said and proving that it was said to this customer, if you need to have that be proven in court years later. Some employers will say, well, I'm going to standardize my verbal waiver. I'm going to make sure that all my employees communicate these 10 lines, whatever it is, to the customers. But if you're getting to that point where you are making a standard form template for your employees to say, at that point, you might as well go the further step and get it documented. Written waiver is a great tool. It's a great line of defense to discourage plaintiffs' counsel who work on cases on contingency. Many people think that a waiver can be easily beaten. That's not the case at all. But what's important is making sure that you have a good waiver. If you have a waiver that's not done very well, that is clearly missing information, purports to be a complete list of things that you're doing, that omission from a document that purports to be full may actually be proof that you didn't do something. So it's important that you actually get something that's specific to your province and specific to your circumstances. There's going to be a difference between a spa that's in someone's house versus the Fairmont, for instance.
That makes so much sense. Now, you have a system, I mean, and let's just get right to this, because you have a system when somebody needs a waiver like this made for them, that you have a little package that, let's talk about that right now.
Certainly. Very briefly, the price is 200 plus tax. In BC, we have to charge both PST and GST, so it works out to 224. You get a waiver that's customized to yourself, and you get a half hour of legal advice that you don't have to use now. You can use it in 10 years from now if you want to, about any issue that you want. So this is a fantastic product. It's done by us as legal professionals with the knowledge, with the insurance that our profession requires. And it's going to give you peace of mind. It's going to help you sleep at night. And depending on what the conversation we have is, we can talk about other things that will help enhance protocols for your business. So that's the price that we're offering it right now. It's very competitively priced. We know that there's online services that allow you to download a standard form. Many of them don't apply to BC or Canada. And the reality is that you have no repercussion if that form turns out to be invalid. You're not going to sue. You're not going to sue some internet company over that. This is our firm. We're putting our name behind it.
And your name is Bear Creek Law. So bearcreeklaw.com.
LLP.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, next question. And we have one of the world's top international spa consultants with us as well, Gordon Toretta, and he's going to be answering, as I mentioned, questions about operations later on. But Gordon, if you have any comments or questions for Mikhail while we're talking, please jump right in there.
Will do. Yeah, no, that was excellent information. I wish you were around 30 years ago.
Okay, the next question is, should we be taking temperature checks of employees and guests?
So the first thing that I would say on a practical note is it's really doubtful that temperature checks are either sufficient by themselves or necessary. In British Columbia and in other provinces, the occupational health regulator, which in BC is WorkSafe BC, has come out with a requirement that employers make a safety plan and post it. And the details of what needs to be in a safety plan are quite vague, but certainly I would say that you're not required to do a temperature check, but you do have to put together a plan that does implement different elimination and protection strategies. Can you take a temperature check? Yes, but you also have to be concerned about asymptomatic transmission, the accuracy, and there's also certainly an element of privacy that you have to consider. What would you do if you're taking a guest temperature at the door or an employee's temperature and it's too high? How do you avoid that embarrassment for the guest or employee? What do you do if you do find a positive? Are you going to shut down and have a cleaning company come in and do a thorough clean for a couple of days? And what if you're taking temperature check afterwards and all of a sudden during the course of a shift or a service, a customer and employee's temperature rises? Are you going to require all your employees to quarantine? So these are very practical questions that each business is going to need to decide. But in terms of should you be taking it, that's going to be up to each individual employer. But I would certainly not have a policy where the only thing you do is a temperature check. Again, create that safety plan. Find out ways to eliminate contact between employees and guests to the largest extent possible. Avoid potential transmission through shared contact surfaces. And if you want to add temperature screening on top of that, you can, but you have to think about these things in advance, because not only do you have legal obligations to protect people's privacy, there's also a practical aspect to this where a customer who's refused service at the door and doesn't feel that the machine's accurate, they may leave a very bad review. And legal point aside, that's something that's going to hurt your business, right?
Wow. And later on, Gordon will be speaking to all of this because he has opened up the Grand Geneva Spa in Illinois under unbelievable scrutiny and organization over a very long period of time. So we'll hear from him later on that one. Can I require my employees to self-isolate after travel?
This is a good one. So in short, depending on what your employment contract says, and believe it or not, all of your employees are under some form of contract. Maybe it's a handshake, maybe it's verbal, maybe it's written. But unless your employment contract says that you can require them to have unpaid leaves of absences, generally the law says, if you're not giving me full-time employment and you're telling me to take time off, that's what's called constructive dismissal. That means the law recognizes there's such a fundamental change to your position that you've essentially been fired from where you were previously and are now being offered a new job. So can you require your employees to self-isolate? Absolutely. But you generally have to pay them. And for a client such as a spa, that becomes much more difficult. If you're doing bookkeeping for a spa, okay, some of it can be done remotely, but most of the services, absolutely not. So yes, you can, but you're going to be faced potentially with a claim for constructive dismissal, which can be significant, especially if you don't have an employment agreement that limits how much damage or notice an employee can get in such a situation. One also has to think about, some employees might be very understanding, and so the risk of a potential claim is quite low, whereas other ones may be disgruntled and looking for a way out, at which point you have to make your assessment as to whether you take on that risk or not. And again, that can always be avoided by just paying them during the 2 weeks. They're not going to have a claim whatsoever, but you're going to be paying payroll for 2 weeks without the benefit of that employee's service.
Wow, yeah, trying to do spa services remotely. Let me see. Your nails are getting done. That just wouldn't work, would it? We could try it. Let's see how much energy that would take. So right now there seems to be a question about whether or not facials are allowed to be done, because does this client need to wear a mask and the therapist wear a mask? What's the answer to that one?
Okay, so this is one for which there's been a lot of misconception, and this comes from poor communication from WorkSafe BC, at least in British Columbia. So if you look at their current guidance, and it's important to understand that it's not the law, it's guidance. Employers are required to come up with this safety plan and post it for their employees. And as part of their safety plan, they're required to consider, again, not implement, but consider how to take different steps to eliminate contact and reduce the possibility of transmission. And so the example they give is perhaps you should not do facials. And that's in their guidance, which you should consider. And theoretically, an employer can consider that and say, no, I don't think it's high risk. From a practical standpoint, a legal standpoint, yeah, you're probably going to avoid prosecution because it's not an obligation. You're not prohibited from performing that service. Well, what's going to occur is WorkSafe BC is going to get in there and they're going to have a chat with you. And if they're not happy with you, they're going to shut you down. And so realistically, there's a difference between being on the right side of the law and being on the side of the law that allows you to continue unimpeded and uninterrupted by regulators and the government. And so at this point, it's going to be up to each spa owner's personal risk level. I think this is actually a fairly risky area, because if other spa owners feel that WorkSafe BC or other forms of government are not allowing spas, you might get, they might report you through hotlines. You might have customers that express concern. And so you get to the attention of various regulators rather quickly, and it's not a fun experience to deal with them. So to a certain extent, this is similar to speeding. Most people speed, but as long as you stay with the flow of traffic, you usually don't get pulled over. So if you're in a situation in a community where people are not doing facials, just recognize that if you're pulling ahead, you're the one that's going to get attention. Can you avoid criminal prosecution or administrative prosecution for this? Yes, I believe it's poorly worded and it doesn't prohibit facials. Do you want to? Do you want to risk the attention from regulators, from counsel, from disgruntled employees, from disgruntled customers? That's the question you need to ask before you engage in that.
Wow, that sounds like a call for a consultation to me. I think that if my business was 100%, dependent on facials, I'd be in your office chatting with you about
Yep.
this so that I could figure out the best plan of action. So what about insurance? What about the CGL, the Commercial General Liability Insurance? Is COVID deemed an act of God? How does it affect me?
So most people are excited when an act of God, that word comes up. The problem is an act of God in insurance is usually an exclusion, meaning they're not going to cover things that are through an act of God. And that's a problem because you actually want your insurance to apply. In terms of your commercial general liability, generally they cannot require you to do things after they've issued the policy. But new policies that are being issued or renewed may require you to have a waiver form that's approved by them. It may require you to present a safety plan or do other things in order to continue coverage. COVID-19 may be considered an act of God, but that's not to your benefit. So that's the problem that a lot of clients are having. They believe that all of a sudden they get some extra protection, some extra payout from their CGL policy, their commercial general liability. That's not the case.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is that it's extremely important to create your safety plan for your spa and to weigh and measure all of these different requirements and regulations as well as suggestions as they would apply to your property.
Absolutely. The last thing you want is if there's a large claim against yourself personally or your business, to have your insurer say, we're not providing you a defense, you're on your own on this one. That's a scary situation to be in. If you do have any concerns, your insurance broker will be able to give information specific to your policy. There's, of course, a large number of insurance companies that provide CGL policies across the Western provinces in Ontario. And each one will have their own best practices that, again, are not absolutely required because they've already issued the policy, but will probably give you peace of mind if you follow them.
That's very, very, very powerful. The next question is, how could someone prove that they got COVID-19 from my establishment, and what happens if I do get sued?
All right. So unlike the US, Canada doesn't have a large regime of personal injury lawyers that are attached to communicable diseases. So asbestos litigation in the States is huge, and they have legislation that has actually changed the burden of proof. And essentially now you don't need to prove exactly where you got mesothelioma from. It's sort of presumed if at any point you had exposure. And we don't have that in BC. And so at first instance, you might stop and think, this is horrible. You know, anyone can say anything. We have to remember that these cases are relatively rare, and the damages that are done in Canadian courts are much lower than in US courts. Typically, the largest forms, if you do get sued, the largest forms of damages would be loss of past earning capacity and future earning capacity. And for an individual that's sick for 2 to 5 weeks, that sum is not going to be huge. You're not going to be responsible for medical bills, right? There might be a claim under the Healthcare Cost Recovery Act, but generally your insurance will step in. If you do get sued, you do have to alert your insurer. That is actually a condition of your policy, that you have to give them prompt notice so they can determine what steps to take, which usually involves hiring outside counsel that they prefer working with and responding appropriately. A person may be able to prove that they got COVID-19 from your establishment simply based upon their own evidence. There's no requirement in Canadian law, except for maybe 2 criminal offenses, such as alarming Her Majesty or treason, that your evidence be corroborated. So you could theoretically go to court and say, I didn't leave my house for 2 weeks. I always wore a mask. The only time I didn't wear a mask was at your spa. And I saw employees coughing. I saw employees close together. I saw all these awful things. After I left, I didn't talk to anyone, didn't go anywhere else. And then 3 days later, I'm sick. And reality is, a lot of judges would get convinced with that. That makes perfect sense to them. So you do have that exposure, but again, the damages are relatively limited in Canada, at least compared to the US. And it's just not a popular thing to occur in Canada for someone to sue as a result of a communicable disease.
I would imagine that if there are questions about how what we've discussed here varies between provinces, that too would be an excellent reason to give you a call, because we'd want to make sure that that what we're saying applies. Do you know of vast differences between the provinces, Mikhail?
So I'll give you. So BC is known to be sort of the wild west of what's called tort. And tort is a fancy French word for the law of non-contractual wrongs. The reason you're able to sue someone in a motor vehicle accident is because of negligence. They committed a tort against you. And BC has one of the uncapped regimes for how much you can get, as it were. And it's always been the subject of reform. BC legislator keeps saying, we're going to put a cap on this. And you may have heard that they put a cap on ICBC claims, for instance. Mm-hmm. So BC tends to have the largest awards. Other provinces are capped to a large extent, practically, or by legislation. So it generally applies throughout. The one thing I will say, on a bit more of a morbid note, if someone does pass away, BC's law, as it relates to compensation for the death of a family member, is extremely limited. It's called the Family Compensation Act. It is extremely limited. Other provinces have a bit more openness to them. In BC, it is terrible. There's essentially no cases done by plaintiff's lawyers if there's a death involved, for instance.
Wow, very, very interesting. The last question that came in from our spas that we chose to speak about today is, the government isn't allowing me to operate at 100% capacity. Will they top up my revenue?
Certainly. To a certain extent, this is going to be a political question. There is no obligation for them to top up your revenue. What I will say, though, is if measures are coming in and you're being excluded because, for instance, the COVID emergency wage subsidy, if you are required to have a business banking account, and if you simply use your personal banking account, for some reason you've been excluded from this, the best remedy is through your local constituency office. They are actually your employees, as it were. You elect them into office, and the easiest way to get any sort of change is through them. One exception is if you feel your business is being singled out. For instance, if you're in a municipality and the municipality itself has suspended operations or business licenses, and you see that your competitors are coming online, but you're not, for whatever reason, that's something that's worth a consult, and maybe that is something that needs to be explored. However, if the government is able to change regulations and change laws without notice, it can do so retroactively. And so very unfortunately, there's no obligation on the government except for the current leading party to continue to offer these incentives, promotions, and measures to try and support local businesses.
Thank you so much. This has been so enlightening for sure. Gordon, do you have any questions for Mikhail?
In terms of communication with guests or members, do you have recommendations? Like most spas will send out itineraries.
Absolutely.
And we do the same. What to expect. So you were talking a little bit about taking temperatures and all that sort of stuff, but and we state it, for example, in ours, at anything that's over 100.4, you'll get retested, and if at that point we could deny service. So any best practices that you see about trying to get ahead of it?
Absolutely. Unlike retail clients where there's no notice of when individuals come in, spas are excellent because it's usually done by appointment. If you have an appointment, make sure you get that person's email, and that is a perfect time to send over new policies regarding staying at home if you've traveled internationally, if you're feeling sick, and also the waiver. From a very practical standpoint, it avoids arguments later on that they just signed at the door and didn't know what they were signing. But it also helps with their expectations. If a person has traveled for a bit in order to get to your spa and is surprised at these policies, they're more likely to react in a hostile way, not necessarily by starting a case, but a negative review on Yelp, Google, Facebook can have just as much devastation as any claim. So the first thing is always make sure that you email in advance, not on the day of, a couple of days before. Perfect time to introduce those documents, policies, and explain what the expectation is. And it gives a great sense of professionalism to your organization.
Makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Fantastic. Do you have any other questions, Gordon?
I think you covered it, certainly very well. Obviously the spas that I'm engaged with are in the United States. So, you're right. There's an awful lot of ambulance chasers down here. So,
Gordon is Canadian, and that's a perfect segue into Gordon and what he does. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I repeat that Mikhail can be reached through Bear Creek Law LLP, which is bearcreeklaw.com, and the number is 604-259-6200. And my gosh, I'm very impressed and very, very thankful for all that you did. And please stay if you can, because you'll probably have some questions for Gordon, but if you need to run, then I understand that too.
No, I can certainly stay. I do note that there was one question that we didn't cover about refusing service from customers that are traveling across borders. Do you want me to touch on that?
Yes, please. Thank you.
This is a tricky one. So the question is essentially, can I refuse service from a customer that's coming across a different province? And I believe the person that sent this over was from Parksville, BC. I believe
yes.
so.
Mm-hmm.
This is, believe it or not, a lot more tricky than you think. And the reason why is that all provinces from Ontario westward have human rights legislation that prohibits discrimination in services on the basis of a person's place of origin. And you would usually think that it prohibits based upon where they were born. No, it actually extends to where they live. So for instance, pre-COVID, you could not refuse to change the tires or service a vehicle belonging to a person in Ontario because you don't like their hockey team or because this person speaks with an accent from the East Coast. So if you're going to have a policy where you want to prohibit people from Alberta or from neighboring provinces that perhaps are having a larger outbreak from using your services, you should not say that we're not allowing people from Alberta, BC, Manitoba to come in. That is an awful way to do it, and it definitely exposes yourself to a claim. How you should do it is to say that if you've been traveling across provincial or international borders, regardless if you're from that province or you're coming into the province from using that service. That way you're not discriminating based upon where that person is from, but just because they've traveled extensively. So that's the best way to do it. And again, if you, what we're seeing in cities that are neighboring other provinces is a lot of bad social media for companies that are not doing this correctly. If they're saying we're not serving Albertans in this drinking establishment or in this restaurant, that gets posted up and people know about it. That's not going to help you in any way. However, one should also recognize that the risk tends to be relatively small that a person will proceed with a human rights complaint if they don't actually live in that province. The time and energy just required to actually prosecute that claim usually outweighs how much you could get from it.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is very important. Wow, very, very important. It's complicated right now.
Absolutely.
It's complicated. Life is very, very different. And what I really appreciate about today is that the more knowledge we have, the more we can make clear decisions about what is best for us, what's best for our business, what's best for our employees and our guests. Because, you know, people who get into the spa industry typically do that because they really want to make a difference. And everything that you're doing today to help us understand is going to help all of us go back to making a difference as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So happy to help.
Thank you so, so much. Gordon, we have a lot of questions for you as well on the operational side of opening up. And you know, we did, as you heard in the bio, this gentleman, well, let's see, he started the Willow Stream Spa chain in Fairmont, and then he was headhunted to Hyatt, where he ran 110 spas for 10 years in multiple countries. And he blew PetSmart's sales service part of their business absolutely out of the water. And now he is with Marcus Hotels and the director of that. So of that chain, and just doing an amazing job. And he and I have worked on spa consulting projects together. So we consult both on operation, protocols, treatments, as well as product development, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. So my first question for Gordon is, what does the guest experience look like, and how has social distancing impacted the operation? Because you're newly opened. Tell us.
Yeah, so we opened up the spa and salon and fitness area on June 1st. And, you know, some of the things that we put into place right out of the opening is, you know, the reservation experience. You know, we don't allow walk-ins to the desk to make their appointments. It's all done online or over the phone. And right now, if a guest has a service, specifically in the salon, they phone us from the parking lot, and we make sure that their technician is ready for them, and then we phone them back or text them back in a system that we have. And then we call them into the building. At that point, we do have a specific COVID-19 waiver that we use, which touches on a lot of things that Mikhail was talking about. We do take the temperature in this scenario. And we do have what to expect email correspondence linked in with their itinerary. So everybody gets an itinerary. We also are cashless. So we've got the ability to put a method of payment on everybody's, and obviously it follows all the masking and all the laws required, but that's so that they don't have to come back to the desk and check out or have any cash transactions. And that's really to keep our associates and our members and our guests safe as well. So, you know, we've, in the building itself, you know, social distance seating. We've actually taken out lounges where people might have waited before. We've eliminated those. We've had to do things like having one-way walkways, one way in, one way out, just so that there's less of a chance of two guests or members, you know, getting within the social distancing guidelines. So it's a different look. And I will tell you though, something, and I think Mikhail talked about it as well, is the very first week that we were open, within a couple of days, I was surprised. We were selling a lot of memberships, and our memberships aren't inexpensive. And what it stemmed from was the consumer confidence in the policies and procedures that we put into place. Like I call it a jet pack, but we have a disinfection spray or mister, you know, and our members, what you might have seen in the background or might not have seen because it was happening during the night shift or the third shift, we're doing in front of the guests, like disinfecting our hands, you know, disinfecting all the fitness equipment, chairs, seating. So it's very overt. So we you know, it's part of I think I said at one point, it's cleaning and sanitization is the new 5-star luxury element, right? And it's consumer confidence. It really is. So so that guest experience is a little different. They see us clean more versus being in the background, so their world is altered a little bit for sure. But they are definitely appreciative of it.
Well, with regards to sanitation, you had mentioned before that there are different sanitization products. Did I say that correctly, Nicole?
Yeah.
Sanitization products that are, it's a joke between us because there's sanitize and sanitization. So I said it correctly. Some work faster than others. So that makes a big difference, because the faster it works, the better, right?
Generally, when you think of a lot of the products that historically spas have used, had either a 10-minute or 20-minute kill time. And in the US, we have the EPA. They actually have a chart that tells you how quickly it disinfects and sanitizes. So we've got a product that we use that has a 45-second kill time. So you think of the desks or the keyboards or the cash handling, credit card machines, where they do a pin and chip or those sorts of things, to pens, right? A clean bin for pens and a dirty bin for pens, and all of that. So it is important that when you look at what you're using, that it is effective. And in all honesty, there was things that we were using and the industry has used for years, and it didn't necessarily do what we needed to do. So we did quite a wholesale change on some of our sanitization practices in the spas to make sure that we got that kill rate and it was effective.
So when people reach out to you, they can ask you exactly what you're using, because
Sure.
perhaps they want to just jump forward and use what you've been testing. Because I can tell you, I have seen operation manuals that Gordon has written, and the procedure to clean the bathroom was about 12 pages long. So he doesn't miss anything in what he teaches. It's pretty amazing. The next question that
yeah.
Go ahead.
It could be a blessing and a curse. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but you know what? That's why so many huge companies come to you and have you be and bring you on as their consultant, because you don't miss anything. So what service restrictions, what considerations regarding service restrictions do you recommend now, or have you enforced?
Well, certainly things that you can't necessarily effectively disinfect. Like, for example, we've limited, and we may lift this one in the near future, but couples treatments, couples massages. Not so much here, if you traveled in the same car, you're in the same family unit, there's no social distancing issues per se. But I have a very, you have about a 14 or 140 square feet, and you have 4 people in the same room. So just from a optical perspective or optics, we've limited that. Hot stones, the types of stones that are used in typical hot stone treatments are actually porous. So we've held back on that. They may come in the near future, but we've held off on that. Again, much of it is just the optics. This is what you said you're doing, or or you're telling our clientele what we're doing, and if we're doing something opposite, then our credibility is shot. So there hasn't been necessarily rulings in the United States of what to do and what not to do. Very similar to Canada. Facials, same thing. We have the same guidance from states that said these are recommendations or guidelines. But again, for us, it's about the consistency, and even more importantly, it's about the safety and for our associates that are delivering it, and the perception of safety that, if we, as we maintain strict guidelines, we've already analyzed industry requirements and we far exceed it. And it has helped us, I think, from a sales perspective and just a confidence perspective, even though we're a lot stricter than what the guidance was given.
That is so interesting, because I love that you keep saying confidence, because there needs to be confidence amongst the therapists and confidence amongst the clients. And I hear you saying that the steps, all of the precautions that you've put in place and made them so structured has created a big boost in your business, and of course confidence on both sides. And Gordon and I have been working on a way to clean the skin before treatments, and we're going to expand on that more. But why not clean the skin even before you cleanse with something that is antiseptic, that doesn't strip the skin? We'll talk about the tea tree prep lotion in a bit. What the PPEs, your personal protection equipment, what is required or mandatory or optional, or what are you doing?
Well, as an employer, and I have it here, I don't have it on because I'm talking with you. But masks are mandatory. We have, we're opening up. We actually opened up the hotel today. With the spa opened up 2 weeks before our hotel, and we've got about 1,000 employees, and everybody's required to wear a mask. There are some exceptions relative to if you're in your office and nobody's in there, but we're all required to wear face masks. The other is, I've seen a lot of spas use these plexiglass shields, like between nail care and all that sort of stuff. We actually have our service providers that are in closer contact also wear face shields. So the mask and the face shields, gloves are all part of it. And then I bought 15 smocks per person, so that they could wear, generally about 5 services a day. They could change that smock after every single customer. And then how we bag our linen and all that sort of stuff. It has to get bagged, it gets tied, it goes down our linen chute, and then we've made arrangements with our laundry company to open up the bag. So it's changed a lot of how we do things. But again, it's just an abundance of caution and care.
Very interesting. 15 uniforms per therapist. That's a big commitment, Gordon. Congratulations for your absolute commitment to safety of your staff.
I wish I was in a uniform company, let me tell you.
I can see that. So the retail, how is retail being handled? I was just in the Bay, and either all the test units were empty, or if they had jars on them, the jars were empty. So talk to me about what your best practices are regarding retail.
Well, we have eliminated testers. We can create a tester for a guest if they wish, but it's far more interactive between the associates now. So we can take the product, like the stylist will take the product off the shelf for the guest, versus getting into everything and touching everything. So, but no testers in the area of apparel. If a person touches, we don't allow garments to be tried on. If they buy it and it doesn't fit or what have you, they can bring it back, and then that in itself goes into quarantine for 48 hours. So I have touched base with a lot of clothing manufacturers, and everybody does things a little bit differently, but again, it is out of a more so an abundance of caution. So, and then if they have a box or a bottle of something, we disinfect our hands before we scan it. We disinfect the bottle, then we disinfect our hands again. We give the retail bag to the guests, so they bag up their own retail. So yeah, there's been some changes there too.
Those are really, really big changes. And so what you're saying is you're making little samples for the clients, so that they don't have to dig into testers and cross-contaminate. That's amazing. That's fantastic.
It's really about being able to control our environment.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And you know what? what we were speaking about retail before the other day, you know, this is a time when even if you're not ready to reopen, you're a small spa, facials are all you do, you don't feel comfortable doing facials yet, that's fine. But call every single one of your clients personally and ask them what their needs are, because you are the person who has seen their skin naked under the lamp. You know that you have the anecdotal experience with the products that you use. You are the best person in your heart to offer skincare to your clients, because I'll tell you, if you don't, you are going to expose them to the fear-based marketing targeting women especially. And Gordon did research for us with our Touche brand to market it online, and found that the fraud on the internet in skincare is absolutely massive. So you're subjecting your clients to that if you don't reach out and make sure that they have the retail products that they need. It's really important. Do you want to speak to that, Gordon?
Well, yeah, the other is in the anecdotally. We did focus groups probably almost not quite 10 years ago, and the perception of the consumer, specifically in the hair and nail sector, facial sector. And if you don't make a recommendation, they don't believe you know your job. And I liken it to going to a doctor. Let's say you have an ailment and the doctor lets you go without a prescription. That's verbatim what we were behind that, those glass focus group panels. And that's, as a spa owner director, that's great. It's not coming from me because I think I'm just pushing retail. But on the same token, it's coming from our customer that says, if you don't recognize that I have a need and legitimate need, and you're not helping me, if a product is going to help my condition or whatever it might be, then they don't think you know what you're doing. So it's retail is important. You talked about online fraud in the skincare industry is unbelievable. Down here, it's $120 billion industry, and I'll tell you, it was easier to get a house than it was to get a merchant ID that talks about selling skincare. The laboratories had to sign off that they were making what they said they were making. The warehouse, the fulfillment center, for spas, it's a good opportunity. And I've talked to a number of spa operators at the luxury 5-star levels, and they were all saying there's just this pent up demand to buy. So you may as well get them the right things. I would say don't sell them what they don't need. My favorite saying is don't sell ice cubes to Eskimos. So I use that down here too. So, but just really take good care of your clients. And there was another study that we did with the largest cosmetic company in the world, or they did the research. I just appreciated what it was telling me. Is if you actually sell products to a customer, one product, two products, or three products, the more products that you sell them or they buy, their retention of that person or that client as a customer goes up from virtually zero if you don't sell anything, as high as 3 is you get almost 80% retention. Now that was done about 6 years ago. So if you want them coming back, there's also a service retention aspect to being in the retail space.
And that will never go away. That will never go away. And we'll talk more about retail sales in another. I just came from a school where I taught that, but in another podcast, because I have so much. I'm chomping at the bit here. I have so much to share on that one. I have one last question for you, Gordon. How are spas communicating their reopening? Let's just get some best practices of what you think they need to make sure they don't miss.
Well, it's interesting. With everybody shut down, there isn't this massive purse of funds that spas have tapped into, like doing, television advertising or buying space or whatever it is. And it all the success stories that I've seen and heard, and even in ourselves, is, the personalized phone call to your members, your guests, your clientele. personalized email, and social media are really the tools that are at play right now. And I was talking to a spotter actor, and, the old telephone, everybody's off, so the odds of the phone call getting picked up now is much greater than it was before the shutdown. So, having that personal contact, especially when people haven't talked to you for a long time, it does express that you care for your customers and your clientele base. So it's going back to really traditional style. Wouldn't call it telemarketing, but it is in a way announcing what you need, and you can field a lot of questions like, what are you doing? Are you open? What services can I have? And having those conversations from a position of caring, as we say, we're in the personal care industry, not just the spa industry. It lends itself for a more specific and a more personalized communication. So going back to what we did, decades ago is really been the most effective from what I've heard in all these spas and including my locations.
And it's the way we should have been all along, is, find a need, fill a need, create. I mean, it's the difference between having customers and having raving fans. When you have raving fans, they won't go away. They'll do everything they can to stay with you. It makes such a huge difference. Absolutely. Gordon and I have an offer to help right now, and that is a half an hour consult, a 15-minute consult for only $49. So if you feel like you need to empower your staff right now, that's my area. Different types of treatment protocols. His area, of course, is the procedures that will absolutely ensure your success. And then, of course, we know that Mikhail has the ability to to create a COVID document for you, and that includes a consultation, half-hour consultation for $200. So, Gordon, I don't have your email, your phone number up here. Do you want to just shout it out for me?
Yeah, it's 312-479-6717.
Great, and all of that will be posted on the email as well. And we're going to pause here, and then we're going to come right back and talk a little bit about some products that can really, really enhance the confidence through adding some sanitation. For instance, how about a massage oil that helps to sanitize the skin? We'll be right back. Thank you.